Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Hope everyone is doing well during these very difficult times. Hope you're staying healthy. Hope you're following the recommendations and avoiding crowds. This is obviously a good time to get a little caught up on some skills, and so we have an app today that looks simple. It looks like this. It looks just like Google Maps, except it's hard-coded for parking lots, and it doesn't have the detail screen in it, so it's a little bit slimmed down. But behind the scenes, there's an awful lot going on here. We're using Google Maps, obviously. We're using Geolocator to figure out where the device is. We're using Geolocator to calculate the distance between the user and any one of the parking lots. We're using URL Launcher to send this to Google Maps for directions. We're using Google Places to get those parking areas. We're going to have to use the RESTful endpoint for Google Places, so we'll have to do some mapping. And we're using Provider, and we're actually using, on this location, ProxyProvider, which is something I've had a hard time finding a good use case for, and it fit perfectly into this app. So we're going to combine all those skills into this one simple app. Let's go ahead and get started.
All right, we've started this by typing Flutter create gmap to get ourselves an application. And the first thing I want to do is get rid of the demo application. So I'm going to open lib, I'm going to go to main, I'm going to take out this big block of comments here. I'm going to call this parking app. And I'm going to take out everything from class my homepage down. Okay, so we'll have an error for a little bit. That's fine. I want one page on this, so I'm going to put a search page. And so we'll create a new folder in lib called screens. And inside that, we will create search.dart. And that is going to be a class search. And it's going to extend a stateless widget. And we're going to let the code complete do our build method. In most of the examples on Flutter Maps, you will find a stateful widget, and they use a controller. You can use a controller to add markers and to move the camera around after you load it. Nothing I'm doing in this app actually requires a controller, and so we don't need a stateful app. So I'm just going to leave it as stateless, and we can refactor to stateful if we need to at any time. Let's just return a scaffold here, and a blank one is fine for now, just so we can come back to main.dart and get rid of this my homepage and put search there instead. All right, so before we start the emulator, I want to bring in the packages that we're going to need for this application. And there's quite a few, so we're going to need Google Maps. So I'll just put in Maps. It's Google Maps Flutter. I've already got it on the screen, but just to take it through from the top, we'll go to installing. This is a bit of a shaky app. I've had some versions that don't work well for me. So I'm going to grab the latest one here. It's 0525, and I've tested this one and it works. So go ahead and grab the latest one on your app. But if you have trouble with it, just come back to this 05.25 so you're in sync with me. All right, in addition to map, we're going to need Geolocator. And so grab that, even the G. Put that right there. We're also going to need Provider. So we'll do Provider. Grab this one here. You can grab the latest version. We're going to need URL Launcher to bring open Google Maps directions. So grab that. we are going to be making an HTTP request out to the Google Places API. Oops, I hit save. That's all right. So we're going to need HTTP. And the last one, we're going to have a rating system, and we're going to pull the rating system out of Google Places, and we'll display it on the screen as stars. And I want to use a package called Flutter Rating Bar for that. So if you just put in Flutter Rating, very first one that comes up is Flutter Rating Bar, and we'll go here and grab that latest version, and that is it. So save that, let VS Code do the import, and we are ready to add our widget, but we do need, before we do that, we need an API key for Google Maps. So we'll need to go to our Google Cloud console, and if you don't have one, you'll need to sign up for that, console.cloud.google.com, and get a project started. This is the same thing as starting a Firebase project, and in fact you can start a Firebase project and come here to console.cloud.google and sign in to that same project, and have the more robust options here that you have on Google Cloud. And what we need here is we need the APIs and services, and so to start we need to go to library, and we need to enable 3 different APIs. We need to enable Maps SDK for Android, and you'll see mine is already enabled, but if it's not, you want to click enable right there. We want Maps SDK for iOS. This is assuming you want to run it on both platforms, and do the same thing here. You want to enable it if it's not enabled already. And then lastly, we want Google Places. So we see the Places API right there, and same thing, we just want to make sure it's enabled. We need those 3. And then we can go back to APIs and services and go to credentials, and we can get a key. And so you can create a new key if you don't already have one. I created one here. And once you have one created, you're going to want to restrict it. So you only want to enable the projects that you actually need. So when you have your key, click Create Credentials up here, go to Edit, and Application Restrictions, you can put none there, but under API Restrictions, you want to restrict your keys. You want to come here and you want to check Maps SDK for Android, Maps SDK for iOS, and Places API. Those are the 3 services that we will need for that key. All right, once you've done that, come back out and make sure you copy your key. You can come back to pub.dev, and let's start with Google Maps, and let's set up what we need to set up for that. All right, so starting in our Android file, so let's go to Android app, src, main, Android manifest. Right here at the bottom, inside the application tag, we want to add this tag here. Okay, and hopefully you left your credential screen open, because we're going to have to recopy that because we just copied and pasted, but you're going to put your key in right here. Don't put mine in. I'm going to reset that as soon as we're done with this one, so use your own. And then for iOS, you're either going to want to go to iOS runner appdelegate.m, or if you have a recent version of Flutter, it's actually going to be an appdelegate.swift. So let me collapse Android. Let's expand iOS. We'll go to runner. We'll look for this app-delegate.swift. Make sure you get this import Google Maps up here at the top. And then you want to insert this line right here after the Boolean. GMS services provide API key. Right there. We want to go back and get our actual API key. Super. And then this option down here looks opt in to embedded views. Yeah, it looks like it's fairly optional. It's not. It won't work without that, at least the version that I'm on. So let's go to our info plist. And down at the bottom, we want to add, I'm just going to copy this. Actually, I'm going to copy one with key and string because that's what I want. So I'm going to come up here to this, copy this one at the bottom, and change the key to this. And change the value on the string to yes, all caps. All right, that should do it. So let's go ahead and test that by putting a Google Map widget into our tree. So let's come to, we can close this iOS here just to make it a little easier on ourselves. Let's come out to lib screen search.dart, and let's take our scaffold. And let's skip the app bar and let's just do a body. And in that body, I'm going to do a column. And we'll do children. And in that children widget array, we're going to do a container, and that's going to hold our map. Let's see, space, enter. There we go. And so for a height, so this is going to be where our map lives. What I want to do is take up the top third of the screen with the map, have it be responsive, and then have the bottom 2/3 for the list of parking lots that you can click on. And so to accomplish that, I'm going to set a height of media query of context.size, height divided by 3. So that'll make it responsive. Whatever the screen size is, it's going to figure that out and display the container at 1/3 the height of the screen. And then for the width, we can do the same thing. Media query of context.size, and we just want the full width. And so for a child, we are going to give it a Google Map object, which we get from our Google Map package. And we're going to need a few things in here. We're going to need an initial camera position, which is the initial center of the map. And so for starters, we want to give it camera position target. And I'm just going to center this on the pyramids in Egypt. So we give it a target object of lat longe, our latitude. I guess that's just a positional argument. Our latitude is going to be that, and then our longitude is 31.13.42. And let's do zoom gestures enabled as well. It doesn't do us a heck of a lot of good on an emulator. If you can possibly run this on your own device, it's going to be a little easier to use than an emulator. And that should be good for now to get us started to make sure this is working. So let's run the emulator. All right, so there we go, and I did not set a zoom level, so that's my my bad. Let's go in here. Just gonna auto format that. That should be in your initial camera position. And so let's say zoom 16.0. So it looks like we're centered on the pyramids, but way the heck back. So I will save that. We will do a hot restart. And there we go, Pyramids of Giza. So we'll replace that with the actual location of the device, but I'd like to kind of build this application up piece by piece and check our work as we go just to make sure it's working. So that is iOS. I'm going to run this on a Pixel as well just to make sure that we're Android users are all on the same page. So let's run that. Okay, so there we go. It's on the Pixel device as well, so I just wanted to check that we had the correct setup on both Android and iOS, and we do. So I'm going to move the Android aside for now and restart my iOS emulator. The next thing we want to do is, actually maybe I'll leave it stop for a second. The next thing we want to do is set up the Geolocator so that this knows where we are or where it thinks our virtual device is anyway. So let's go ahead and complete that setup. So I'm going to come back to pub.dev and pull up Geolocator. All right, and so one thing we want to check is that we're using Android X, which is in our Gradle properties file. Android X is the default now, so we go to Android. It's right here, Gradle properties. You should see use Android X equals true and enable Jetifier equals true. If not, you're going to want to copy this and paste that into here. Also want to make sure we're using SDK version 28, which we can do in our build Gradle file. Right here, so it's the one inside your SRC, that build Gradle. You want compile SDK version 28, which we have, so we're all set there. And then they go into some directions here on how to use the package, and then at the very bottom are some very important permissions. So I wish they'd put that second in this document, but we do need to add one of these. So not both of these. Either you want find location or course location. So we're going to use find location tag. I'm not sure if it says here, but course is okay. Yeah, course is roughly a city block. So if you want more of a find location, obviously you go with access find. So come back here into Android. Down here, we're looking for our manifest. So we're in app, SRC, main. There we go. Android manifest, XML. And we want to put this after the application. So right there. That should get us set up for Android. And then for iOS, let's collapse Android. Let's go into iOS. We want to go into our runner. Our info plist, and we want to take these values here and copy them down below what we added for the map. There, let me just tab that in. And so there is this option down here if you would like to access the device location when your app is running in the background. I'm not going to do that for this app. I don't think we need that. So we're just going to leave that off and just do this permission right here. All right, so now we did that, we should be able to replace the pyramids with the actual position that we're in. And so we'll do that. Let me close all this stuff. We can close info plist. Should be done with all these permissions. And we're done with pubspec.yaml. And so we can replace these made up values with the actual values. And you'll find that the map widget will get very cluttered very fast. So I'd actually like to do as much as I can in services. And so in the lib folder, I'm going to create a new folder called services. And I'm just going to set up a service that goes to the geolocator and gets the coordinates of the device. So we will create a new file and we will call that a geolocator service, geolocator underscore service dot dart. And that's a class of geolocator service. And not too complicated here. We just want to return a future, which will be a position. And we'll need to import that from the geolocator package. So we'll call that get location. And it's going to be asynchronous. So we'll do async keyword. We will create a geolocator variable, which will be a new instance of our geolocator. And all we need to do here is we need to return our awaited value, which will be geolocator.get current position. So you can get the current position, which is a future, a one-time thing. You can also get the position as a stream if you want to, if that fits your application. We just really need the current position of the device one time. So we'll say get current position. We can pass in the desired accuracy. This is for iOS. We have this in the background, in our permissions actually for Android. So location accuracy will be high. And we need to pass in location permission level. Which is a geolocation permission, permission dot location. And we need a semicolon at the end, and this needs to be brought in. And this needs to be a capital L. There we go. And let me just expand that so you can see the whole thing. Telling it the accuracy level we want, giving it the permission level, and it goes out, gets it, and it's going to return it as a future. And so to receive that, we're going to get a future back, obviously. And so we're going to use FutureProvider to resolve that, so we don't have to use a future builder and on our Google Map, because we're, as I said, this is going to expand. This is going to be a lot of widget space, and we don't want to add a future builder to that if we don't have to. So we'll use FutureProvider. So we'll come out here to main.dart and let's wrap the material application with a widget, and that widget will be FutureProvider. And we'll need to import that from the provider package like that. And we will want to create provide. What am I doing? Semicolon. That's a full colon. Full colon. Context. Goes to, and this is where we want to pull in our service. So up here, let's get rid of this green, and let's do a final locator service. And we will just create an instance of our Geolocator service. Like that. And then down here, we can reference that as our locator service.getLocation, which is the routine that we just created. Do a period there. All right, so that's our future. So then if we go into search, .dart, inside of our build method, we can bring in a final current position, which is going to be equal to provider, which we need to import, .of, add our semicolon at the end, and then that's a generic, so we want to tell it what kind of future it's looking for, and it is looking for a position. And I need to import that as well. Give it a second to catch up. All right, I'm just going to manually import that. It's Geolocator / Geolocator.dart. And there we go. So this feature provider is going to provide us this position that we are passing in from our service through this feature provider on our main into our search, and it's going to work just like a variable. And the fact that it's a future and needs to be awaited, resolved, we don't have to worry about any of that, which is the beauty of the provider package. We do need to guard against it being null. So here at our Google map, in fact, maybe at our whole body here. So right up above the column, let's wrap, actually, let's not wrap this, but let's just check and make sure our current position is not null. So only if it's not null do we want to return the column. Otherwise, down here where we get the error, we want to put a colon, and we want to return, let's just do a center spinning widget. So we'll do center child circular progress indicator, like that, and that will give us a loading spinner as it searches for the location. And so then we can come down here and replace these hard-coded values with current position dot latitude and current position dot longitude. Okay, so let's restart the emulator. And apparently I still have my pixel selected, so I'm going to come in here, I'm going to get allow access, and I am not at the Googleplex, but my emulator is, so that's where we get. And so that worked great for Android. I am going to stop the Android, and I am going to run the iOS just to make sure we've got the setup correct for both. All right, so we get the same. It's going to ask for our permission. We're going to allow while using the app, and there we go. I'm not in San Francisco either, but my emulator is. So works on both platforms. We are now ready to go to Google Places. We have our location, get the parking lots that are in our vicinity, and start to display them here in the list below. So let's do that next. Okay, so to get an idea of what we're in for, let's pull up the Google Places API. I'm just going to type in Google Places API into Google. You got the overview. And I'm going to go to place search. And just to get a start, I'm going to go down to nearby search. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to grab this here just up until nearby search / to get started. And I'm going to put this in Postman just so I can get a good breakdown of the way this data is structured. So we'll start there. So we're also going to want to say that we want JSON. So you can do JSON or XML. So we want JSON. And then for our parameters, we can do, we'll start with location. And we will set that equal to, let's go to the pyramids again if we still got those. So I'll do 29.9792, comma, 311342. And this is where we put the type, and we want parking, so this could be any of the types that you can search in the Places API, which I think is detailed here somewhere. There's a key of all the different types that you can search. And we're going to do rank by equal to distance. So this will give us the results in order of the ones that are closest out into the ones that are farthest. And then lastly, we need end key equals, and this is where we're going to put our key. So I'm going to go back to my credentials. I'm going to copy that and put that right there. Going to hit send, and hopefully we'll get some valid results. And we do. All right. So this is what we want to model. This is going to give us, I believe, 20 results. We're going to get a next page token if we want more. We're not going to worry about that. We're just going to take the first 20 results and display them on the screen. So we get this results array, and it starts here. We get some geometry, which has a location object, which has latitude and longitude of the parking lot. We get the name of it. We get some photos. We get rating. 1 star, thanks. And then we get the number of ratings there, the vicinity, so that's primarily the address is the vicinity. And then it starts over, so this is the next one right here. So we want to model this. We just want to pick out the data that we want to display on the screen or that's useful to us. And so definitely latitude and longitude are going to be useful to us. So we're going to want to map the location object. We're going to want to map the geometry object. We're going to want to grab the name. We are going to want to grab the rating, the user ratings total, and the vicinity. So I like to start from the inside and work out. So the very first object that we need to model is location. So let me slide that over. And let's create a model. So let's come to, I'm going to collapse all these Android and iOS folders. And inside the lib, we're going to create a new folder called models. And we'll create a new file, and the first one we'll create is location.dart. And that's going to be class of location. And the two objects that we want to grab here are a final double of lat and a final double of LNG. And we need a constructor. We'll do our name parameters. So we'll do some curly braces. We'll do this .lat and this .lng. All right, and then we need a custom factory constructor to create that from JSON. So we'll do location.fromJSON, and we will pass it a map of dynamic keys and dynamic values. and we will name that parsed JSON. Come down here, do our colon, and we will map the latitude property to the parse JSON brackets lat property. And we will map the LNG to parsed JSON LNG. So this right here, if you've never done this before, this is so that we can pass our JSON in there, and this will be the property from our JSON object, and we will map this to the property in our Dart object. They happen to be the same, but in some cases, and we'll see this soon, you can map things that are named differently. For instance, we have underscore properties here in our JSON, and we want to convert those to camel case for Dart. You can certainly do that here, but that's all we need for the location model. So let's save that. And then let's move up the tree. We're going to have geometry, and our geometry is going to contain our location. So let's do another model. So inside our models folder, we will create geometry, geometry.dart. And that will be class geometry. And we only have one property here. It is of type location, which we will need to import. That's what we just did right there. So we'll bring that in. And we'll call that lowercase location. Create a constructor with this dot location. And then our factory constructor. So from JSON, we will be passing a map of dynamic keys, dynamic values, also called parse JSON. And then just one property. So we will be mapping the location property to location, oops, I got to spell that right. Location dot from JSON, parse JSON, location, and then semicolon. So this is going, we are seeking out this object here in the JSON. We are passing it to the factory constructor we made here, passing into parse JSON. That's going to turn it into a location object, which is what we're looking for here in our geometry object. All right, so that gets us up the tree to geometry, and now we want to map the results, and I am going to call those place. So we will create a new model called place.dart. And it will be class place. And we're going to have quite a few properties here. So we're going to have a string of name. We're going to have a double of rating. We'll have a integer of user rating count. We'll have a string of vicinity. And we'll have a geometry called geometry. And so we create a constructor with curly braces, and we can just do this dot, and it will start feeding them to me in alphabetical order, and I will take them in the order that they come. I forgot something looked wrong there. Forgot a parentheses there. User vicinity, this dot vicinity, and I do need to follow that up with a colon at the end, or semicolon. All right, and then we need our factory constructor. I need to import geometry as well. Let's do that. There we go. And that's the geometry object that we just built here. All right. So our factory constructor will be from JSON, just like all the others. Just like all the others, it will be a map of dynamic keys, dynamic values. And just like the other models, it will be parse JSON. We will be passing in. And so we'll start with name, and we can map that right to parsed JSON name. Do a comma there, so this is coming right out of these properties right here. We can do rating. And so that will be parsed JSON rating dot to double. And as it turns out, I know this from doing this the first time, and I don't know if you see it on any of these. Okay, so here's one here. If there are no ratings, and there's none on this particular object here, it just isn't there. And so we need to protect against that. So if we want to check and see if the parsed JSON rating exists, so we can put if the parsed JSON does not equal null, then we want the rating object. Otherwise, we'll just pass null into the object. And that should be parsed JSON. There we go. And the same thing with the user rating count. So obviously there's no rating because the user rating count is 0, so you don't see it on this object. So we want the same thing. So the user rating count, we'll check first if parsed JSON user ratings underscore total does not equal null. Then we will pass it the parsed JSON value of user ratings total. And so this is an example you can see of, we have a field with underscores and actually a slightly different name. We use count versus total here. So we're grabbing this from the JSON and we're mapping it to our user rating count property in our Dart object. And so if that doesn't exist, we just want to pass in null. All right, vicinity is parsed JSON vicinity. And then lastly, our geometry is going to be equal to our geometry object, which we want to create by geometry from JSON, and we want to pass it our parsed JSON geometry. And then we can end that with a semicolon. So just like with the location, we're going to take this geometry object, we're going to pass it to the constructor, the factory constructor from the geometry model, and that will give us a Dart geometry object, which we can use in our place object. Okay, so hopefully that all made sense. So now we can go to our services, create a service where we can actually bring in these objects, and now we have our models all set, so we can pass the results of that to the models and get a nice object back that we can work with. So if we come here to services and we go to new file and we create a places service.dart, and that will be a class called places service, shockingly. And this is going to need our key, so we're going to put a final key, and we go get that key that we have been using all along for, I think we're pretty much done with Postman, so let me get that out of here. Get that key from our Google project, pass that here, and we really just want one routine here, which is to get our places, and so that's going to be a future, because it's HTTP, and it's going to return a future list of our place model, and we're going to want 2 closing brackets there. For list, we're going to need to import nothing, so let's leave that there for now. That's fine. So we get places. We do need to bring in place. That's what I was missing. There we go. Get places. And so we're going to want to pass the latitude and longitude for which we are searching. So we'll pass a double lat and a double LNG. We will make this an async. And let's create a variable called response, and that will be equal to await http.get, and this is where we want to put our search string. And so I thought I was done with Postman, but I'm not quite. So we want to grab this string here. This is what we've made. This will search the pyramids. We can modify that. So we'll come in here. I will that there. Oops. Here we go. Add my quotation mark back in. And that's going to need a semicolon all the way at the end. Let me expand this as much as I can. All right, so it's hard to see all the way on the screen, but we can shorten this by, first of all, I can take out where we have location. We want to put our $, and we can put our latitude there. And then we can put our $, brackets. Actually, I think I don't need the, there we go. Don't need the brackets there. And then for our key, we can get rid of the actual key and replace that with $key. That shortens it a little bit. And for HTTP, we want to import package http/http.dart, and we want to do that as HTTP. While we're up here, we're also going to want to import package convert. So that is, Dart convert. And we'll do that as convert. We'll use that in just a minute. So we'll go down to this next line. So this gets us a response. Our JSON is going to be equal to convert.json decode response.body. And let's see, I doubled up on parentheses there. All right, so that's going to get us inside of this object. And what we actually want to get is the array of results. So we're at this level with results, page token, HTML attributions. So to dive in that next level, let's do JSON results. And that's equal to JSON, and we just grab our results object. And we will cast that to a list. So as list. And so we want to go through each object, map it to a place object. And so to do that, we'll take our JSON results, we will apply a map. We'll do 2 opening parentheses, and we will call that place. After one of the closing parentheses, we'll do an arrow function, and then we will throw in our factory constructor for place. And we are going to pass that place. And then at the very end, we want to cast that to a list. And then we can return that. And that, excuse me, is our service to go out and get a list of parking lots or places from any latitude or longitude. Okay, we're making progress, my friends. We need to then bring these places into the widget tree. And to do that, we're going to set up a proxy provider on our main.dart. So let's come out to main.dart and let's talk about why we would want to do a proxy provider. So we have a future here. We've got a future that is going to get the location. It'll get us our latitude. It'll get us our longitude. Then we have another future for our places search that wants that latitude and longitude as an input to create a future that will give us a list of places or parking lots that we can display on the screen. Now, you can have multiple futures here on our search widget, and they can be nested, and Flutter is smart enough to figure out and resolve all the futures and not get confused about the order that they are resolved. What it can't do, however, is take a future that is dependent on the inputs of another future and figure out how to display the widget tree there. That is where you want to use ProxyProvider so that you can resolve this future and then pass it to the ProxyProvider, and then you can pass that to your widget and everything will be worked out for you. So to show you what I mean, first of all, we're going to need more than one provider here. So we've set up a FutureProvider, but we need to switch this over to multi-provider. And we still want our FutureProvider, so let's reestablish the FutureProvider that we just had by wrapping that. And then also we want a providers object here. So I'll move that in there. And then I need a comma after that bracket. I'm going to just code format to clean things up. So that should restore everything as it was. Let me just make sure that's still working. Perfect. All right, so then we've got our FutureProvider, and we're going to get value out of that. So below that, I'm going to add a ProxyProvider. And what I want to do is pass it the input type here, and then the output type here. So the input type that I want to pass is a position, because that's what we're getting from the FutureProvider. And then the output type is going to be a future of type list place, and that means 1, 2, 3 of those. And I need to import place, and I need to import position, and then we want to open up a parentheses here. I'm going to hit space and hit enter so we've got some room here, and I need to provide it with an update parameter. And so it starts with a context. And then this is going to be our input value. So we've got position. And then the output here, places. And then we open up curly braces. And we want to return if the position is not equal to null. We want to return our places service function. So let's bring that in. So let's bring in final places service is equal to a new instance of the places service that we just created. Dot get places, and so then we can pass in position dot latitude and position dot longitude, and then so if our position is null, we want to just pass in null to our value. And that's our ProxyProvider. Now you notice we are still passing a future. So in our search widget, we are going to need to set up a FutureProvider to resolve the fact that this is a future. But we aren't going to be passing it in awaited values. We're going to do that here in our ProxyProvider. And that is the purpose of a ProxyProvider, to handle the inputs rather than passing them directly into your FutureProvider. And so let's continue with that to make it a little bit clearer. So let's go to our search provider. Our search widget in search.dart. And we want to be adding positions down here. But I think I'm going to bring these in at the top because we also want to be setting up markers eventually on our map. So we really want this up high. So I'm going to wrap the scaffold with a FutureProvider, and then this is where we're going to bring in the value from our ProxyProvider. So we are going to create, we'll say context, and so we can bring in, so I'm going to bring in up here a places provider, which is going to be equal to provider.of, oh dear, yeah, semicolon at the end there, and then we come in here, and what I'm looking for is a future list of type place, and 1, 2, 3 there, and also import place. Oops, gonna spell that right. Models place. Sometimes that auto import doesn't like to pull this stuff in. And so I'm just going to bring in that. And that brings it in without having to pass it the parameters. We do need to check and make sure this is resolved before we serve that up, because I think we probably just saw that it wasn't resolved yet. What's that? Wait a minute. Could not find. That's probably because I haven't saved this file. Yeah, okay. All right, so we're coming up on about an hour on this one. So just to bring it this, why don't we break this one up into a couple of parts? But to bring it to a more satisfactory conclusion, why don't we actually display these places on the screen just so we can see that they are real and we did actually create them. So below our container, let's come down to, I'm going to add a column or add a comma there, and then I'm going to auto format that. So I want to go below the container and I want to create a size box just to give a little space between the list and the map. So let's do a size box with a height of 10. And then below that, let's do an expanded widget so it takes up the rest of the screen. And I'm going to do a child, and that child is going to be a list view builder. And I'm gonna push this down on the next line. And so we'll start with an item count, and that is going to be our places.length. And then the builder will be in parentheses context comma index, and then we'll do curly braces. And we'll return, let's do a card. And then we'll give the card a child, and the child will be a list tile. That will make it look a little bit more like Google Maps, so they have like a card style going on. And so let's just give it a title of places index dot name for now. Of course, that's got to be a text widget. Sorry. Do that there. Bing. I'm gonna. We need to return that value. I just watched Groundhog Day. That's why all of a sudden the bings are coming out. And so there we go. We got a list here that's scrollable. It's got the names of the parking places that we are searching here. And so that gives us kind of a satisfactory conclusion to this episode. So the next time we come back, we're going to complete this card. We will get the distance for each one of these. We'll get the ratings and we'll display that on the screen. We will actually build some markers. First we'll do the standard marker and then we'll do a custom marker like I showed you at the beginning with a nice round blue marker with a white P, which is kind of the universal parking symbol, at least where I'm from. And then we'll do a link here so you can flip over to Google Maps and get directions to it. So we'll wrap up there. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that, and we will see you in the next video, hopefully. Take care.